and I've got an opinion about sleepy Joe Biden, who wants to pack the Supreme Court, except he can't afford to actually come out and say, I want to pack the court. In fact, as recently as, say, 6 months ago, during the primaries, he said, he was dead set against packing the court. Now, he's a little more circumspect about what he has to say about packing the court. He only said to 60 Minutes in a story that's going to air on Sunday night that he's going to form a commission to examine how to reform the court system. But that has only one meaning. He wants to suggest that only if he is elected president, believe me, and if Trump's second term, you're not going to see Joe Biden advocating for reform of the court by adding more court members, because that would mean that Donald Trump would get to choose those court members, those associate justices. I thought we'd talk about that with Tom Jipping, who is deputy director of the Edwin Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies and a senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Tom, good to have you back on the program.
Thank you very much. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you as well. Tell me this. Is there any other possible purpose or agenda that Joe Biden could have in saying, I want to have a bipartisan commission examine reforms to the court system, specifically the Supreme Court, if it isn't to simply add more members to the court?
Well, that's one of the oldest dodges in politics. When you don't want to take a position, either because it won't help you politically or you just don't know what you're talking about, say, I'm going to form a commission to study it. There's nothing that needs to be studied. There's nothing in the judicial system that needs to be reformed. So this is just a dodge. It's a fake cover. That way he can hide behind a commission that would advocate what he doesn't have the guts to advocate now.
And I take it that what he's counting on is that his Democrat friends and allies, both in the DNC and outside of it, will understand reform is code for, you bet I'm going to pack the court if I get the chance. Yeah,
reform. There's probably 6 or 7 different, quote, reform ideas that have been floated. You remember when during the campaign, Bernie Sanders suggested, well, we could circulate Court of Appeals judges up to the Supreme Court, and then they would move on in some way. I mean, I wrote a column on that for the Daily Signal of the Heritage Foundation about how that's unconstitutional. They get an A for creativity, but the point is this is a solution in search of a problem. The only, quote, problem is that they don't like some of the decisions that the Supreme Court has been issuing. I got news for them. Just wait, elect somebody else, appoint new justices, but don't destroy the independence of the judiciary.
Well, and isn't there a point to making the federal courts immune to public pressure, to the mob in the streets? I always used to say mob in the streets, and we didn't actually have any mobs in the streets. Today, Tom, I have the advantage that if I say mob in the streets, I know that people in cities all over America know exactly what I'm talking about when I say when the mob in the streets demands X, Y, or Z. They say, yeah, we had the mob in the streets just last night, and maybe the night before, too.
Yeah, people will have seen that on TV probably in the last 48 hours. People should read the Declaration of Independence because 2 of the items on the list of things that King George did that required us to separate from Great Britain involved manipulating the judiciary. I mean, this was one of the very reasons judicial independence was one of the reasons for American independence. I mean, you can connect those dots. They're right there for everyone to see. Former Chief Justice William Rehnquist said that judicial independence is the crown jewel of our system of government. So going back to the very birth of our country, the idea of a judiciary independent from the manipulations of politics is at the absolute heart of our ability to be free. 20-some years ago, I actually gave some lectures in universities in Russia about the American legal and judicial system, and we talked about how they have a written constitution, too. In some cases, it sounds better than ours. What they don't have is an independent judiciary. It's part of the political apparatus, and that's exactly what has been the most unique and important thing in our system that has provided us a sense of individual rights and the rule of law. And here, Democrats and Joe Biden, though he won't tell you, want to destroy it for a little bit of political gain in the short term.
Now, Tom, back in the day, so the 9-member court has been around for 150 years. The founders of this country probably couldn't have imagined that we'd reach a day where people would routinely serve into their 80s, 90s, that sort of thing. I mean, there were some people who got to be a bit older, but, I mean, until 1900, the average age of Americans was about 47. So living into your 80s, 90s, even toward 100 was relatively rare. Does it even make any sense, say, to consider term limits on Supreme Court justices, or is it better to maintain the total independence of saying until you either die or make a decision to voluntarily step down, you have this position forever?
Well, some of those circumstances have changed, although remember, and there were some justices or nominees in the early part of our history who actually declined to serve. They said, I've got something better to do, when they were asked to serve on the Supreme Court. But that was also a time when, based on how it was designed, the judiciary was a lot weaker and had a lot less to do with our sort of daily life in America than it does now. At the same time, it was Alexander Hamilton who said the complete independence of the courts is what's necessary. Their design, it was correct. That's not the problem. And in fact, if we've got the wrong kind of justice, let's say 3 justices for 20 years or 30 or 10 years apiece, or 1 for 30, makes no difference. The problem is not how long they serve. The problem is what kind of justice they are while they're serving. That's what we've got to focus on. And that's exactly what President Trump has been doing. That's why Amy Coney Barrett is such a great nominee for the Supreme Court, and it's exactly why Democrats are trying to fight her sort of on the cheap by talking instead about these other issues.
Well, and in fact, wouldn't you? I've been a supporter of ACB, and I think Monday we're going to see that she's going to be confirmed to the court. But one of the things she's promised to do is say, I'm going to look at the law, I'm going to look at the Constitution, and I will make decisions, and I'm not writing law. I'm not there to create laws. That's the job of the Congress. You and I both know that if she even gets near that in a decision, say she's writing the majority opinion or even the minority dissent from a future Supreme Court decision, if it appears that she's saying, well, there really should be a law, or I see something in the Constitution that isn't there in the text, you know that she'll get roasted for that, won't she?
Well, and she should be, if that's what she does.
I agree.
But I suspect that instead what she's going to do is probably look for more opportunities than she would otherwise when she does decide cases, when she does write opinions, to put in her opinions some of these principles that we've been discussing and debating now. I mean, she's seeing, as she did just 3 years ago, she did not have an easy confirmation to the Court of Appeals, but as she's seeing now, those issues are critical. People need to understand just how important impartiality and independence are. And I think, and I hope she will take opportunities in her opinions, and she's going to be there, God willing, for 30 to 40 years to remind us about how important those principles are.
Well, real quick, before we have to break, I'm talking to Tom Jipping from Heritage. Isn't this an opportunity that if Obergefell had been decided and the court said we don't see gay marriage in the Constitution, in effect, in layman's language, they could be sending it right back to the Congress to say, you write a law. Don't find it in the Constitution, in between the lines or under the penumbra or wherever you want to find it. You write a law. Now, that's the opportunity for both legislatures and the Congress to write the law if that's what they think is necessary. The court doesn't have to do that, does it?
Well, you and I benefit greatly when the court says, that's not my job, because then we know whose job it is. It's Congress. We elect them. They're responsible for us. So when you have a court that says, nope, I'm supposed to follow the law and I'm not going to venture into politics and policy, we all benefit.